The first website came online in late 1990. At the time, Tim Berners-Lee was working at CERN laboratories. He wanted to make the internet easier to use. At the time, you literally had to be an expert in computer commands just to work the internet. What he had in mind was the World Wide Web. And on the 20th of December 1990, the first web page was put up, and you're looking at it right now. For the first time, the internet was within reach of the average person. Everybody could use it now. The first web page was simply a little bit of a guide as to what the World Wide Web was and how to use it. The original page no longer exists, but a later copy from 1992 can be found at this web address. And here's a fun fact. The World Wide Web was built on a NeXT computer, and it was actually Steve Jobs who founded the company NeXT during his time away from Apple after being fired in 1985. If Steve Jobs hadn't been fired, we may not have the web as we know it. It's pretty interesting how things link together. So what was the first picture uploaded on the web? Again, it was Tim Berners-Lee, and this time for a bit of fun. In 1990, some of Tim's fellow employees at CERN formed a parody band. One day, in 1992, Tim asked to scan some of the photos and said that he wanted to publish them on some information system called the World Wide Web that he'd just invented. They didn't really think much of it, and they handed over the photos. Little did they know that this was going to be a historic moment, the very first picture on the internet. What about the first search engine? Although internet search engines had been around for a while, even before the World Wide Web, they were very limited in nature and only contained a few pages. The first full-text web browser search engine like the ones we have today is something that you've probably never heard about. It was called Web Crawler and was launched back in 1994. It wasn't until 3.5 years later, when Google arrived on the scene, that Web Crawler basically faded into obscurity. But we have to recognize that today, in the field of AI, we're building off the shoulders of giants.
Me today is what's going to happen to us if machines can think.
If you'd asked me that question just a few years ago, I'd have said it was very far-fetched.
There are many pioneers that laid the foundation of AI, even as far back as Aristotle introducing associationism in 300 BC, and this would start our attempt to understand the human brain. The first attempt and the beginning of AI all starts with psychologist Frank Rosenblatt in 1957. In that time, he developed what was called perceptron. A perceptron was a digital neural network that was designed to mimic a few brain neurons. Frank's first task for the network was to classify images into two categories. He scanned in images of men and women, and he hypothesized that over time, the network would learn the differences between men and women, or at least see the patterns that made men look like men and women like women. Just a year later, the media caught on to the idea and the hype was strong. In 1958, the New York Times reported that the perceptron was to be, quote, the embryo of an electronic computer that will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious of its existence." End quote. Unfortunately for Frank, despite the hype, his neural network system didn't work very well at all. This was because he only used a single layer of artificial neurons, making it extremely limited in what it could do. And even worse, there wasn't much that could be done about it. Computers of that day could only handle this simple setup. By 1969, the computer science community had abandoned the idea AI was dead. Geoffrey Hinton thought that everyone else was just plain wrong. He theorized that the human brain was indeed a neural network, and the human brain evidently made for an incredibly powerful system.
It seemed to me there's no other way the brain could work. It has to work by learning the strengths of connections. And if you want to make a device do something intelligent, you've got two options. You can program it or it can learn.
Right.
And we certainly weren't programmed, so we had to learn. So this had to be the right way to go. So you have relatively simple processing elements that are very loosely models of neurons. They have connections coming in. Each connection has a weight on it.
Just for clarification, a node is an artificial neuron, and a weight represents the strength of connections between neurons.
That weight can be changed to do learning. And what a neuron does is take the activities on the connections times the weights, adds them all up, and then decides whether to send an output. And if it gets a big enough sum, it sends an output. If the sum is negative, it doesn't send anything. And all you have to do is just wire up a gazillion of those, just figure out how to change the weights, and it'll do anything. It's just a question of how you change the weights.
Geoffrey Hinton is a superstar in the AI world. Having authored 200 peer-reviewed publications, Hinton was instrumental in the fundamental research that brought about the AI revolution. After studying psychology, Hinton moved into computer science and pursued his lifelong quest of modelling the brain. Originally from Britain in the UK, he moved to the University of Toronto. In Toronto, he would go on to develop multi-layered neural networks. He and his team quickly realised that the problem with Frank Rosenblatt's single-layer approach was that more layers were needed in the network to allow for much greater capabilities, and the computers of the day were now powerful enough to handle it. This multi-layer approach solved the problem that Frank Rosenblatt had. The neural networks were much more capable. We call this multi-layered approach a deep neural network. The result is a program that can make accurate guesses and predictions about data it's never seen before. Others began innovations based off deep neural network. A self-driving car was built in the late 80s on neural network, and later in the 90s, a man by the name of Yan Li-kun would build a program which recognized handwritten digits. The field was stifled by two problems: slow and inadequate computing power, and two, a lack of data. In 2006, the world had finally caught up to him. Computer processing speed had grown significantly since the 90s. Moore's law, observed by Intel's co-founder Gordon Moore, stated that the number of transistors per square inch doubles about every 2 years.
What about this internet thing? Do you know anything about that?
Sure.
What the hell is that exactly?
Well, it's become a place where people are publishing information.
Right.
So everybody can have their own homepage, companies are there, the latest information. It's wild what's going on. You can send electronic mail to people. It is the big new thing.
The birth of the modern AI movement can be traced back to a single date, September 30th, 2012. On this day, Geoffrey and his team created the first artificial deep neural network to be used on a widely known benchmark image recognition test called ImageNet. Hinton's program was called AlexNet, and when it was unleashed on this date, it had performance like no one had ever seen. AlexNet destroyed the competition, scoring an over 75% success rate, 41% better than the best previous attempt. This one event showed the world that artificial neural networks were indeed something special. After this point, everyone began using neural networks in the image benchmark challenge, and the accuracy of identifying objects rose from Hinton's 75% to 97% in just 7 years. 97% accuracy is surpassing the human ability to recognize objects. Computers recognizing objects better than humans has never happened in history. Soon, the floodgates of research and the general interest in neural nets would change the world, even recognizing disease and medical imaging. Soon neural net AI was tackling video, speech, science, and even games. Today, we see AI everywhere. Tesla, among many companies, has created a sophisticated self-driving AI, which is already sharing the road with humans. It is predicted that self-driving cars will reduce accidents by up to 90%, while smart traffic lights would reduce travel time by 26%. Netflix and YouTube even uses AI to learn what shows you watch and recommend new ones. Uber uses machine learning AI to determine surge pricing, your ride's estimated time of arrival, and how to optimize the services to avoid detours. TikTok is completely AI driven, leading to its popularity, as we've covered in a previous video. So now AI is everywhere. It's in our daily lives, even if we're not aware of it. Of course, there's many examples of AI being used, but perhaps the most interesting uses will come after we reach singularity. After this point, what happens is a bit of an open-ended question.
Blockchains store information across a network of personal computers, making them not just decentralized, but distributed. This means no central company or person owns the system, yet everyone can use it and help run it. This is important because it means it's difficult for any one person to take down the network or corrupt it. The people who run the system use their computer to hold bundles of records submitted by others, known as blocks, in a chronological chain. The blockchain uses a form of math called cryptography to ensure that records can't be counterfeited or changed by anyone else. Bitcoin is different from credit cards, PayPal, or other ways to send money because there isn't a bank or financial middleman involved. Instead, people from all over the world help move the digital money by validating others' Bitcoin transactions with their personal computers, earning a small fee in the process. Bitcoin uses the blockchain by tracking records of ownership over this digital cash, so only one person can be the owner at a time and the cash can't be spent twice, like counterfeit money in the physical world can. Blockchains that manage and verify online data could enable us to launch companies that are entirely run by algorithms, making self-driving cars safer, help us protect our online identities, and even track the billions of devices on the Internet of Things.
There are a lot of threats out there, many come in the form of viruses. Computer viruses got their name because they act like viruses and replicate. They infect lots of files on a machine and can be spread to another machine by doing things like sending files to someone else or using an infected USB drive on another computer. Then you have worms, adware, trojans, and rootkits, which are hard to detect and can give attackers control of your machine. SQL Slammer/Sapphire infected web servers, leading to bank ATMs crashing. It messed with Continental Airlines electronic ticketing, and it blocked 27 million people from the internet. Even Seattle's 911 emergency services were affected. Slammer used an attack on one type of software, but then infected machines would spread this worm through the net. Melissa, the villain behind this virus, named it after an exotic dancer. It began as an infected Word document posted on an alt.sex Usenet group. If that was opened, it would send itself to 50 people on someone's Microsoft Outlook email program. Should never open attachments that look a bit sketchy. cern. This nasty worm also made Microsoft Windows systems its target. Again, it spread far and wide as it sent itself to people in your email address book. Code Red. Estimates on the damage caused by Code Red range in the billions. Web pages that were affected suddenly got the message, "Welcome to worm.com, hacked by Chinese." Norton explains the HTTP request exploits a known buffer overflow vulnerability, which allows the worm to run on your computer. The malicious code is not saved as a file, but is inserted into and then run directly from memory. It has been called one of the most sophisticated attacks ever that almost brought down the internet. Pentagon, CIA, and the British Parliament shut down their emails.
Never give up.
Building new muscle with carbon nanotubes is one such possibility. Scientists at IBM are also working on using nanotechnology to analyze DNA in just minutes, instead of weeks, to treat cancer patients with a customized treatment plan. We're also seeing the use of nanotech in chemotherapy or vaccines to target specific types of cells in the body, where experimental nanosponges are being tested to absorb toxins in the body. Nanotech is also being explored as an early diagnostic tool to detect cancers and infectious diseases long before our current technology is able. Some ideas include a tiny device that gets injected into the body as a sensor or a medical delivery device. This all sounds positive, but there's a downside too. Is it secure? Tiny nano devices are typically controlled by a program on a traditional electronic device like a computer, smartphone, or server, meaning they could be very hackable. Some digital security experts posit that a single nanoparticle in the body with its own processor could be hacked. But they also say that if someone had more than one particle in the body, which many treatments would require, a hacker could theoretically turn them into a network in the body, using the body's own systems to communicate and do their bidding. One of the most obvious and dangerous applications for biomedical hacking is ransomware. If a hacker took over your inner nanotechnology devices, they could demand a ransom with fatal consequences. If you're unable or unwilling to pay, they could easily turn your body against you, and at the very least make you suffer or get sick, if not kill you. It may also be possible for unsavory characters to use nanotechnology itself against their enemies, not only in hacking attacks such as inhalable particulate powders to treat lungs. Some worry this technology could be an easily weaponized delivery method for bioterrorism efforts beyond the hacking dangers. Getting infected with something could be as simple as breathing the air, taking a shower, or getting a regular vaccination from your doctor.
It all began with the famous formula E equals mc squared by Albert Einstein in his theory of relativity, explaining in detail the relationship between space and time and between energy and mass. According to this equation, energy and mass are interchangeable. Mass can therefore be transformed into energy or energy into mass. In 1928, Paul Dirac, a famous British physicist, became the first to find an equation that united quantum physics with the theory of relativity to describe the behavior of an electron moving at a relatively high speed. But his equation posed a very interesting problem. Just as the formula 2x equals 4 can have two possible outcomes, that is, x equals 2 or x equals -2, Dirac's equation could also have two solutions, one for an electron with positive energy and one for an electron with negative energy. This is where Paul Dirac arrived at his conclusion. For every particle, there exists a corresponding antiparticle that exactly matches the particle, but with an opposite charge. Meanwhile, in 1932, American physicist Carl Anderson, after a year-long study of particles using a cloud chamber, announced the discovery of the positive electron, which of course was strange since electrons up until then had been well known to hold a negative charge. Thus was born the positron, or positive electron. This demonstration that the positron and electron were exact opposites of each other also further provided proof and experimental validation to Dirac's theory. Antimatter is being produced in particle accelerators like the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. In the universe, there's also already some naturally occurring antimatter. The big mystery surrounding antimatter ever since its discovery, as far as scientists are concerned, is why there isn't more of it in the universe. And if there is, then where the heck is it? That's exactly why scientists are trying to constantly cook up the perfect recipe for making antimatter in the lab, so as to be able to study and observe it. How do you keep a substance that literally and violently destroys almost anything it touches? It would require a good vacuum to ensure the antimatter doesn't inadvertently bump into a stray atom in the air, and also keep it away from the sides of whatever you're using as the container, since it's made of matter also. The solution to this is a magnetic bottle that can use electric and magnetic fields to trap the antimatter and hold it suspended in place. The real challenge, however, is making and storing lots of these atoms. Getting a positron and an antiproton to come near enough to each other that their electrical attraction at least has a chance to combine and form an atom before they annihilate any ordinary matter is another task altogether. The European Centre for Nuclear Research, or CERN, is one such place that's dedicated to the study of these antiatoms. Using a machine called the antiproton decelerator, they do just that by slowing the antiprotons down while the electric and magnetic forces gather them together with some positrons. The alpha experiment conducted at CERN even managed to make atoms of antihydrogen and store them for 17 minutes, and change the magnetic orientation of the antiatoms by shining microwaves on them to show more detailed measurements of their properties. That may not sound like a huge achievement, but considering how extremely difficult it is to even make a single atom of antimatter, it's actually quite impressive. When scientists study these atoms, what they're really looking at is the atomic spectra, which can be understood as a pattern of colluted lines, much like a barcode. The behavior of the positron in an atom of antihydrogen is said to be the same as a normal electron in hydrogen. By that logic, their atomic barcodes should be the same. If, however, there's any difference detected, it'll enable us to find out the actual difference between matter and antimatter, and finally solve the enigma of the asymmetry between the two. One of the most significant uses of antimatter that we can see is for making bombs. Sound deadly? Well, it is. When it comes to a nuclear bomb where the atoms are split, it converts only a few % of its mass into energy. However, in the case of matter and antimatter annihilation, as in an antimatter bomb, almost the entire mass would be converted into energy. Scientists have said that dropping 1 gram of antimatter, weighing as little as a mere paperclip, would release more energy than the Hiroshima bomb, which is both fascinating and terrifying all at the same time. Think of ways to achieve near light-speed travel. Just imagine what as little as a few micrograms of antimatter could do to help us achieve the energy levels required for relativistic space travel.
And already you can see a much more stable fracture. Okay, I have to do this quick because this stuff does not last. 525, you can see there's a whole range of tones here, but 525, you're going to hear, probably hear the fluctuation there. If you don't know where that is, I do. Is in Sedona, and it is a well-known vortex phenomenon. There's several of them there. And
radionuclear research. But it is more than that, because there are lots of physicians. I had an inch time. Actually, CERN is dealing with radionuclear research. But it is more than that, because there are lots of physicians. I know some. They're doing very strange experimentation. There are beings from portals coming in and out. It's physicists from the CERN who told me this.
They've testified to beings coming in and out of portals.
Yes. They have, apparently, in the bottom of the CERN, this portal, this door, where they are dealing with all the subatomic dimensions. They say there are 17 different dimensions of reality. That's what those physicists say. Some others say there are more dimensions, And now, when you look at what is going on in the CERN, there is a fight from some of the military agencies, Intel. They say that there is a fight on time. They're trying to change time. Actually, CERN is dealing with
falling. Mr. Babylon is falling. Babylon falling? CERN identified as a secret entrance to the subterranean CIA headquarters beneath Lake Geneva in Switzerland. This guy's been talking about this for a little bit. Because CERN is the largest and most advanced nuclear and particle physics laboratory in the world, security at the top secret facility is most stringent on Earth. Consequently, it's a perfect place to hide the entrance to one and only Central Intelligence Agency. As originally depicted in March 31st, 2015, Truther.org report entitled 10 Reasons Why Switzerland is Now Home to the Central Intelligence Agency. Hard evidence now confirms that Switzerland is in fact harboring the Central Intelligence Agency. However, exactly where the CIA headquarters is located within Switzerland has remained a mystery until now. Short. CERN serves as the secret entrance to CIA headquarters, which is located in the underwater alpine canyons of Lake Geneva, a lake so deep it had to be explored by Mir 1 and Mir 2, Russian submarines which are known for their ability to dive up to 6,000 meters, or 20,000 feet. Consequently, CIA headquarters beneath Lake Geneva is only accessible via underground trains from CERN and via submarines which travel through 275 kilometers, almost 200 miles of subterranean tunnels, which evidently begins in Geneva, Italy, and ends in Lake Geneva. This is probably written by the Central Intelligence Agency.
Never give up.
Are used to treat cancer using proton, ion, and electron beams, which for some tumors are more effective than the conventional radiotherapy, and also in particular because they do not have side effects, do not create problems to the healthy tissues. Superconducting materials have the possibility of wide application. The image was too fast. I cannot go back in a moment. But the previous image showed a radiation dosimeter on board the International Space Station. And here you can see here is a high-resolution 3D color image of a medical image made with CERN electronics. So several decades of exploration at CERN and in other laboratories for particle physics across the world allowed us to discover several elementary particles. They are shown here, and understand their properties in detail and their interactions. The last one to be found is the Higgs boson, which was discovered at CERN 10 years ago, as Magdalena correctly said, a very special particles without which atoms, of which we are all made, will not exist as stable systems. So
energy grids, which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. In his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Itzhak Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid, which composes the nucleus of the atom, vibrates at approximately 10 to the power of 22 Hertz, which means 10 followed by 22 zeros, at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. An atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to the power of 5 Hertz. an entire molecule, composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field, vibrates in the range of 10 Hz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 103 Hz. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. The so-called states of matter are actually variances in the state of energy, and human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states, motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. The concept of the hologram can be most easily understood by using an example cited by Bentov, in which he asks the reader to visualize a bowl full of water into which 3 pebbles are dropped, as the ripples created by the simultaneous entry of the 3 pebbles radiate outward towards the rim of the bowl. Bentov further asks the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is suddenly flash frozen, so that the ripple pattern is preserved instantly. The ice is removed, leaving the 3 pebbles still laying at the bottom of the bowl. Then the ice is exposed to a powerful, coherent source of light, such as a laser. The result will be a 3-dimensional model, or representation of the position of the 3 pebbles suspended in midair. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye, when the glass of water itself is examined. Of further importance is the fact that, even if we dropped our frozen hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor and broke it into a number of pieces, each individual piece would recreate the entire holographic image all by itself. The smaller the piece, the fuzzier and more distorted would be the resulting holographic projection, but the fact remains that a whole projection would nonetheless be made. The key to creating any hologram is that energy in motion must interact with energy in a state of rest. In the foregoing example, the pebbles represent energy in motion, while the water represents energy at a state of rest. To activate, or, in effect, to perceive the meaning of a holograph, energy must be passed through the interference pattern generated by interaction between the moving energy and the energy at rest. In the simple example given by Bentov, this requirement was fulfilled by holding the frozen interference pattern in front of the coherent light to project the 3-dimensional holographic image into space. As Marilyn Ferguson, editor of the Brain Mind Bulletin, tells us, another feature of a hologram is its efficiency. Billions of bits of information can be stored in a tiny space. The pattern of the holographic photograph is stored everywhere on the plate. The universe is composed of interacting energy fields, some at rest and some in motion. It is, in and of itself, one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity. According to the theories of Karl Pribram, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London, the human mind is also a hologram, which attunes itself to the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state which we call consciousness. With respect to states of expanded or altered consciousness, such as gateway uses, the process operates in the following way. As energy passes through various aspects of the universal hologram and is perceived by the electrostatic fields which comprise the human mind, the holographic images being conveyed are projected upon those electrostatic fields of the mind and are perceived or understood to the extent that the electrostatic field is operating at a frequency and amplitude that can harmonize with, and therefore read, the energy carrier wave pattern passing through it. Changes in the frequency and amplitude of the electrostatic field, which comprises the human mind, determines the configuration, and hence, the character, of the holographic energy matrix which the mind projects to intercept meaning directly from the holographic transmissions of the universe. Then, to make sense of what the holographic image is saying to it, The mind proceeds to compare the image just received with itself. Specifically, it does this by comparing the image received with that part of its own hologram, which constitutes memory. By registering differences in geometric form and in energy frequency, the consciousness perceives, as psychologist Keith Floyd puts it. Contrary to what everyone knows is so, it may not be the brain that produces consciousness, but rather consciousness that creates the appearance of the brain. The consciousness process is most easily envisaged if we picture the holographic input with a three-dimensional grid system superimposed over it, such that all of the energy patterns contained within can be described in terms of three-dimensional geometry using mathematics to reduce the data to two-dimensional form. Bentov states that scientists suspect that the human mind operates on a simple binary go, no-go system, as do all digital computers. Therefore, once it superimposes a three-dimensional matrix over holographic information it wishes to interpret, and reduces that information mathematically to two-dimensional form, it can completely process it using its fundamental binary system. Just as any computer made by the hand of man can process volumes of data and make various comparisons between the data and information stored in its digital memory. Our minds operate in the same way, perceiving by comparison only. Bentov states the proposition this way. Our whole reality is constructed by constantly making such comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we always perceive differences only. In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the human brain in its holistic, nonlinear, and nonverbal mode of functioning acts as the primary matrix or receptor for this holographic input, while by operating in phase or coherence with the right brain, the left hemisphere provides the secondary matrix through its binary, computer-like method of functioning to screen further the data by comparison and reduce it to a discrete, two-dimensional form.
Never give up.
you.